Rachel Reeves, a prominent Labour politician, has taken a firm stand against any U-turn on inheritance tax (IHT) changes for farmers, even as the Treasury explores possible ways to mitigate the policy's impact. Despite this, some Labour MPs, as well as members of the government, are becoming increasingly concerned about the political fallout from the policy. This situation has been further exacerbated by protests from farmers in Westminster, with many feeling the policy could devastate family-run farms. So, yeah, it's been quite a contentious issue. The Chancellor, who is in charge of the Treasury, seems determined to push ahead with the inheritance tax changes, despite growing concerns among Labour MPs and ministers. Some of these individuals are genuinely worried about how the policy is being received, especially with farmers protesting in Westminster. The Treasury has been exploring various ways to soften the blow, such as adjusting the gifting rules for people over the age of 80, allowing them to pass on their farms to their families without having to survive another 7 years. It sounds like they're trying to find some middle ground here, right? In addition to this, officials have been analyzing how the budget's changes will impact different types of farms. They're specifically looking at small and medium-sized farms and how they differ from smaller holdings. However, despite these efforts to ease the impact, one Labour MP confirmed that the Treasury has made it clear that a complete reversal of the policy is absolutely not happening. So, it seems like they're not backing down on this one. Interestingly, despite the Treasury's firm stance, there are still some within Labour who believe the policy could be softened further. A source within Whitehall suggested that any full U-turn would have already happened by now, especially before the farmers' protests began. However, they believe that the government might consider some changes during a fiscal event or spending review when some of the heat has gone out of the issue. Right, so they're kind of waiting for the dust to settle a bit before making any decisions. When asked about possible changes to the policy, a spokesperson from Number 10, Downing Street, made it clear that the government was committed to implementing the policy as outlined in the budget. They emphasized that the decision had been difficult but necessary given the economic situation the government inherited. So yeah, it seems like they're sticking to their guns on this one. In Downing Street, there's also a belief that the backlash from farmers won't be a significant problem for the government because Labour voters, who are largely unaffected by the changes, aren't likely to be as vocal in their opposition. However, senior figures within the Labour Party are worried about the amount of political and media attention the issue is receiving. It's been all over the news, with images of tractors driving around Parliament Square, which has definitely been hard to ignore. Additionally, during a countryside conference this week, Steve Reed, the Environment Secretary, was confronted by a farmer who, in a deeply emotional moment, argued that his only way to preserve his family farm for future generations would be suicide before the inheritance tax policy takes effect in 2015. This really highlights the seriousness of the issue for some farmers, right? Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party, has also been grilled on this subject, with some accusing him of having issues with the people of Lincolnshire. When questioned about the impact of the budget on family farms, Starmer acknowledged the concerns, but also pointed to the government's £5 billion allocation to support farming over the next 2 years, which he argued is the largest investment in sustainable food production. He also stressed that the vast majority of farms would not be affected by the inheritance tax changes, noting that the £3 million threshold for IHT would mean that most farms wouldn't meet the criteria. Okay, so it seems like the government is trying to downplay the impact here. On the other hand, Reed has been taking a more conciliatory approach, attempting to reassure farmers and defend the policy on various media platforms. He has met with the National Farmers Union, NFU, multiple times in the last fortnight, trying to ease tensions, especially after their mass lobbying event earlier this week. However, the NFU has expressed frustration that the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs is only weighing in. In fact, Downing Street sources revealed that Reed was only informed about the policy on the eve of the budget, just like many other cabinet ministers who were apparently kept in the dark about tax changes in their own areas until the last minute. That's a bit messy, right? Now, the president of the NFU, Tom Bradshaw, is reportedly frustrated and feels that continuing to engage with Reed over the inheritance tax issue is pointless, since his department has no authority on the matter. The NFU has demanded to meet directly with Rachel Reeves, who, up until now, has not personally met with the union's representatives. It seems like they're looking for some direct communication with the person who actually has the power to influence this policy. In the meantime, a new Treasury analysis revealed that only around 500 farms a year out of approximately 200 would be affected by the inheritance tax changes. This estimate, however, has been met with skepticism by the NFU, which conducted its own impact assessment. The NFU's findings suggest that small and medium-sized farms could face severe financial difficulties, potentially losing their incomes due to tax payments, even if the cap was set at $2 million, which would be the threshold for a farm owned by two spouses. Yeah, it seems like the numbers are quite adding up here, at least from the perspective of the NFU. One Labour MP, who represents a constituency in a largely rural area that was once Conservative-held, shared that they had spent a lot of time speaking with local farmers who were convinced they would be affected by the tax changes even if they didn't meet the new rules. This MP emphasized the confusion caused by conflicting information, especially from social media. They pointed out that with the decline of local newspapers, farmers no longer had a reliable source for information, which has led to a lot of misunderstandings. I see. That's a huge problem, right? It's hard to make sense of everything when the flow of reliable information is disrupted. This MP also highlighted the anger felt by many farmers, not just over the inheritance tax changes, but also about broader issues such as inconsistent government support, poorly negotiated post-Brexit trade deals, and broken promises from the government over the years. The MP argued that this frustration has been building up for years, and the inheritance tax policy is simply the latest spark in a wider fire of discontent. They stressed that it's important for Labour to listen to farming communities if they want to hold on to rural seats in the next election. Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of frustration that's been building for a long time, and this could seriously impact the next election. Polling data released recently shows that the general public, including many Labour voters, are siding with the farmers over the government. A survey by More in Common revealed that 58% of the public supports the farmers' protests, with 24% of Labour voters expressing strong support. Only 6% of Labour voters said they strongly opposed the protests. This suggests that, despite the government's efforts to defend the policy, they may be on the wrong side of public opinion. Interesting, right? It looks like the government's stance might be losing favour with the public, especially with such a large portion of Labour voters backing the farmers. Luke Trial, the director of More in Common, pointed out that the polling results suggest the government may have miscalculated the political and public response to the inheritance tax changes. Yeah, it definitely seems like the government has underestimated how strongly people feel about this issue, particularly in rural areas.